Next, we'll move on to batteries. We have Carl Smith, who's the president of Rechargeable Battery Recycling Corporation, and this is a national model for battery extended producer responsibility. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for taking your time out of your day and testifying before the committee. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Carl Smith, and I head what is arguably the oldest and arguably one of the most successful voluntary product stewardship programs. We've been operating in North America since 1994. Collecting rechargeable batteries. In several provinces, we've extended to all batteries. In California last year, in 2010, we collected and recycled 1 million pounds of rechargeable batteries through 5,700 collection locations. We have about 60,000 throughout all the provinces of Canada and through the United States. And I have to disagree with Chairman Chesbrough on his one opening statement. I traveled further than Neil did. I live and work in Atlanta, Georgia.
My apologies.
That's okay. We have submitted plans and have operated under product stewardship regimes in several states and many provinces in Canada. And what I'd like to talk about today were some of the things that you can or cannot expect with an EPR program based on our experiences. And they are in British Columbia, and I agree with Neil that British Columbia, if you're going to do it, that has been the easiest environment for us to work of any place we work. But we've submitted a plan in the state of New York and Ontario and Manitoba, City of New York, lots of different places. So I'd like to spend my time at least focusing on some of the things that we know are legitimate expectations and things that we would caution you about. But if you want to talk about batteries, I'll talk about batteries too. Three of each. First, here's things that we know will happen. First of all, we know that, at least to some extent, product stewardship will lessen some of the financial stress that municipalities are experiencing. And some of my friends, including Santa Clara County and Del Norte County, will attest to that. Their financial strain that recycling that waste is real. We know that it's central to any strategy is to take some of that pressure off. I agree with it wholeheartedly. The only thing I would suggest to you that it may not be the most efficient way to relieve that stress, but it is, in fact, it does do that. It has done that in the municipalities in Canada and other places where we've operated. Number two is that industry, under the right circumstances, will support EPR. But it's not usually in a highly regulated fashion. It is in a situation where the environmental benefits of doing it are very clear. That's why we were formed in 1994, because at the time most of the rechargeable batteries had cadmium in it, and it was very clear that it's a heavy metal and you didn't want it in the landfills. I think you'll see through a number of industries, carpet is a good example, that under the right circumstances, when there's clear environmental benefit and there's a structure that makes sense, industry has stepped up and gone to the table and said, we can do this, we'll do this. Okay. Number three is we do believe that product stewardship programs, particularly when they are designed and run by industry, can be successful. Now, there's a lot of ways to define success when you get into product stewardship, but as far as collecting a lot, diverting a lot, helping in the finance of programs, we believe that it can be successful. So those are three things I think you can expect. So let me suggest the things that you should not expect. First of all, a lot of the biggest supporters of product stewardship believe that it's going to result in greener designs of products. I have not seen that and do not see that, particularly in a regime where you go by state and province by province, because manufacturers don't design for a province or by a state. Second of all, when you still pay, no matter what the design, as you do with batteries, as you do with other things, there's no incentive to necessarily have a greener product. So I would suggest to you that if your real intent is greener product, and packaging may be the one exception to that, but if you believe greener products are going to result, and that's the reason you're doing it, I would caution that. Second, I'm going to disagree with Neil. It's probably the only thing I'm going to disagree with Neil. I question whether there are net green jobs created by product stewardship. I do believe that some jobs shift, but I don't think imposing additional cost onto a producer necessarily creates new, unique jobs. That usually has to do through growth, economic boom. It's not by imposing a quasi-tax or a fee on a producer. So that's number three. Number three is in a lot of product stewardship regimes, there is the expectation that the producers or the manufacturers can somehow change behavior and influence consumers to do some things that they have been unwilling to do before. Do not expect that a group of manufacturers, whether they be battery or electronics, is somehow going to convince you to do something different. Because we advertise or we've created a channel or made points more accessible. Something more has to take place. One of the reasons why British Columbia has been successful is that there is a mindset there of returning things and recycling things that isn't apparent in other provinces and in most states in this country. And so if you build it, they still may not come, if you will. And we find that all the time with batteries. We have many more sites than we have active sites, if you will, that are actually generating batteries for us around this country and through Canada. So I had only 5 minutes. I was determined to keep the 5 minutes, but I would love to answer any of your questions.
Chairman Cheshbon.
On your point about manufacturers not altering their designs, and the reason that you give being they don't market products for particular states or even countries, is there a scale at which that it might not be true? I mean, let's take, for example, the European Union or potentially California, where you have a much larger marketplace that, I mean, if you take, for example, air quality and electric vehicles and things like that, there's certainly California has tended to drive the marketplace for the country. But
yes, but even still, I would suggest to you that in most cases, cars has been an exception, that manufacturers in the battery world will design for North America, generally speaking. Certainly, there are very few products that are designed even for Canada and just for Canada. I believe, obviously, California going in one direction as a bellwether could have some impact on that. But again, it still gets to the other issue that says there's some reward at the other end or less financial risk and on the other end if you do a better product. So, for instance, we receive batteries with mercury and we receive batteries without mercury. Under the scheme set up, you don't charge, you charge by weight, and so there's no sanction for a poorly designed product in that case.
Vice Chair Miller.
Thank you, Chair Rakowski. Mr. Smith, the question I have for you is, based on your success in your battery recycling business, what would be your suggestion on how California could actually do it and be successful at it as we move forward? Because this is something that we've been struggling with, and based on your experience and expertise, what would you recommend?
Well, how can I say this nicely? California does have a tendency to be overly prescriptive in how it approaches things like this. If you look at, for instance, I'll give you an example. In BC, the battery regulation was literally, it was 2 lines of a bill, and it said all batteries that are contained in the following products are subject to collection and recycling, and that was it. And we had to submit a plan on how we were going to achieve that, and we did, and we went back and forth for a couple months on what should be in the plan, and it was accepted, and we're off and running. And our battery collections last year in British Columbia increased by 70%.
I could probably write that bill.
Yeah, I mean, you ought to see what that regulation looks like, and look and compare it to generally how states, not just California, go about those things.
Well, but specifically though, like the pathway for collection, curbside.
We have. We have 5,700 collection locations in California, and we divide them into 4 categories: municipalities, public agencies, those are government entities that aren't open to the public, retailers, and businesses. Businesses could be a hospital, again, not open to the public. We don't go curbside. If a municipality says we want to collect curbside, that's great. We take it once it gets to that municipality, and we take it from them. In fact, many of the several municipalities that are coming up later, we get at least the rechargeable batteries from them, as we have for the past 15, 16 years.
How does that work in a rural area?
Same thing. It's essentially, for our program, you go to our website and say you want to sign up to be a site, and we send you a kit in your site. And if it's a Joe's Bar and Grill in the middle of nowhere, or the local 7-Eleven, some of our biggest collection locations are the Best Buys, the Home Depots, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Sears, the retailers like that, but also Del Norte County, which is coming up next, I think. We grab all the batteries that they collect centrally, and we pay for the shipping and packaging and take care of it.
How do you step up from a rechargeable battery program to like all batteries? Or scale up, I guess.
Scale up? Rechargeable batteries are about 15% of all consumer batteries in the marketplace. So think about primary or single use being about 85%. So there is some differences there. They can't typically be recycled in the same locations that rechargeable batteries are. They're usually, and there are fewer recyclers because there hasn't been as much of a demand in North America. And there are none in California. The primary battery recyclers, the closest one's in Trail, British Columbia, and the next closest is in Michigan. But we can take on the volume. It's not the volume that's the issue. It's making sure we're clear on why we're doing it and what we're doing it for and how it's going to be run.
Your success so far in California has been based on the opportunity to recycle, right? Putting the infrastructure in place, not necessarily the percentage of batteries that have actually gotten recycled. Is that a fair characterization?
We haven't been required to, nor have we reported collection rates. We estimate our collection rate of rechargeable batteries is approximately 10% of what we think is put in the market. Other people collect rechargeable batteries besides us, but we're the only EPR program that does it, funded by industry. So that's some scale, yes. We tend to look at how much we grow each year, and our collections in California grew by 16% last year.
Okay, thank you.
Assemblymember Campos.
Thank you for being here. You mentioned that you have more sites than active sites, and then you talked about that it's more of a mindset. And so I'd like to get from your perspective what you think maybe as Californians, because you also mentioned the policy that it was just a little too broad. What are things that we need to do to actually change the mindset, or is that just a culture in other places?
I think it's a broader cultural thing. It's not something that if I knew how to change the mindset of a population, I'd be a very rich man doing probably something very different than I'm doing right now. It's something that occurs over time.
Do you believe it occurs through the policies and just being a little bit more precise in the policies that we're?
Issue. I think there's leaders that have to emerge who believe in it and say why. It has to be something that everybody owns, even if it's the producer paying for it. But some of the places where extended producer's responsibility hasn't worked is when they said, you just pay for it, you take care of it, you educate it, you do everything else, and now I'm absolved. And that's a situation where you build it and they may not come because you're not doing anything fundamentally to change some of the culture and the behavior behind recycling.
So what are some of the things that they've done in British Columbia that you think has been very successful? The leadership has really embraced this?
Leadership has embraced it. The municipalities have very much embraced it. It has been a supportive environment. It's not really the same type of regulatory atmosphere that we face in other jurisdictions. It's they call me, I call them, and we figure out how to do something, with each other. And it's also something that defines the government there. They believe in it, and it's essential as part of their mission. It's not a tertiary goal or objective that they talk about.
Well, thank you for being very frank with us, because I think that's helpful as policymakers to look at this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.